Hi, I'm Firefighter Lombardo, and today I'm going to read to you Curious George by H.A. Ray. Loretta here is going to help me out. This is George. He lived in Africa, and he was a good monkey, and he was always curious. One day, George saw a man. He had a yellow hat. It was straw. The man saw George too. What a nice little monkey, he thought. I'd like to take him home with me. Now, he put his hat on the ground, and of course, George was curious. He came down from the tree to look at the man in the yellow hat. The hat had been on the man's head. George thought it would be nice to have it on his own head, so he picked it up and put it on. The man with the yellow hat put George in a little boat, and the sailor rowed them to cross the water to a big ship. George was sad, but he still had to be a little curious. On the big ship, things began to happen. The man took off the bag. George sat on a little stool, and the man said, "George, I'm going to take you to a big zoo in a big city, and you'll like it there. Now you can run and play, and you won't get into any trouble." George promised to be good. But it's easy for little monkeys to forget, right, Loretta? On the deck, he found some seagulls, and he wondered how they could fly. He was very curious. He had to try, and it looked easy, but... Uh-oh! What happened? First this, and then this. "Where's George?" The sailors looked and looked. The last time they saw him, he was struggling in the water and almost all tired out. "Man overboard!" "Well, monkey overboard," the sailors cried as they threw him a lifeboat. George caught it and held on, and finally he was safe aboard. After that, George was more careful to be a good monkey, and until then, at last, the long trip was over. George said goodbye to the kind sailors, and the man with the yellow hat walked off the ship onto the shore, onto the city, to the man's house. After a good meal and a good pipe, George felt very tired. And he crawled into bed and fell asleep at once. The next morning, the man telephoned the zoo. George watched him. He was fascinated, and he went away. George was curious, and then he went to the telephone too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wow, what fun. Uh-oh, he called the fire department. Ding-ling-ling, George answered the phone. Hey, firemen rushed over to the telephone. Hello, hello, but there was no answer. They looked for the signal and a big map that shows where the telephone was, and they didn't know it was George. They thought it was a real fire. Hurry, hurry! The firemen jumped into the fire engines and took the hook and ladders. Everyone out of the way! Hurry, hurry! The firemen rushed into the home and they opened the door, but no fire. Only a naughty little monkey. Catch him, catch him! George tried to run away, and he almost did, but he got caught up in the telephone wire. Then the thin fireman caught one arm and the fat fireman caught the other. "You fooled the fire department," they said. "You'll have to shut up and you can do no more harm." They took him away and shut him in a prison. George wanted to get out. He climbed the windows and tried the bars, and then the watchman came in. He got to the wooden bed to catch George, but he was too big and too heavy. The bed tipped and the watchman fell over, and quick as lightning, and George ran out the door. He hurried onto the roof, and he was lucky to be a monkey. He walked out on the telephone wires quickly and quickly over the guard's head, and George walked away. He was free. Down the street outside the prison wall, a man stood with balloons. A little girl bought a balloon for her brother. George watched, and again he was curious. He felt he must have a red balloon, so he reached over to try and help himself. And instead of one balloon, he took all the balloons, and the wind carried him away. And George held on tight with his hands. Higher and higher, the houses looked like toy houses, and the people looked like dolls. George was frightened. He held on very tight. At first there were great dusts, then it quieted down. Finally, George was very tired, and he ended up near the traffic light. Everyone was surprised, and the traffic got all mixed up, and someone heard him call George, and he saw the man with the yellow hat. George was very happy, and the man was too. George slid down the post, and the man with the yellow hat put him under his arm. And he paid the balloon man for the balloons, and they drove away. And George was at the zoo. What a nice place to live for George. Well, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you guys at the next one.